Here from Psychosensory Academy, talking about brain art and looking at how we use QOCTU in a session to work out what's happening, because it can be so subtle and you've got such a short time with people. So that's a guide if you're looking at this later. You can freeze frame it on here, and all the explanations about what we're talking about are written here. But let's look at the session. So this is a really common subject. This is children who feel upset or sick or frightened at school. Basically, school really, when they go to school, it becomes really aversive. It sometimes starts off just with a little bit of feeling unwell, and then it usually builds to the point where they can't go either in the school door or even into the school playground. So it builds up and builds up. So when we start using QOCTU, when we start sort of asking questions and observing and calibrating and tracking, we can really take in so much information in that short space of time that we have. So I like to ask about things that they like, and I want to ask about something that activates the olfactory system and the gustatory system, because I want to use them to use their brain in that way, because of how scent and taste is involved with memory recall. So the cue, if you like, the aim is to be neutral, but you're observing to see and you're calibrating to see what the response to that is. So let's say QA, that activates neural network A, and we can see from the response that we could call that neural network A safe. So there's internal sensory information accessed. Using SMECs, I can see that there's a real seeming image, there's sound, there's sense, there's tastes. It looks like a place, a time, and some content is actually shared that this is that what comes to mind is a past event or past events, but one in particular when his friends were invited and had a lovely day with mum and granny, and they had ice cream. So the cognitive thoughts, like I said, are vivid ISI, and he's thinking of his own way of how he rewards himself. Parasympathetic system is activated, rest and digest, and looking at him, you can see that there's a change in the nose and the mouth. The smile softens, giggles, and moves towards the practitioner. So we don't have any information about what he experienced in his body, his feelings. His emotions are described by himself as happy. He looks happy as well, and there's a sense of feeling contented after thinking about the ice cream, almost as if he's just eaten one. His perceptions about having the ice cream were that this was good times, that he is good, and his friend is included in his family, so he's also proud. So this is really useful to generate this state because it builds trust, and so when they've been upset like this, and when they're in a session as though there's something wrong with them, it's really great to start a session about the things that they like and that they find confidence in and pride in. So that's the reason that we do this. And then the next Q, QB, is just a gentle when you think about going to school, because he knows we're going to talk about that. He knows that's what the session's about. Immediately, in a flash, neural network B is activated. We can imagine it's in the amygdala or in that area. And there's, let's call it response B, there's clear aversion, and looks like there's adrenaline cortisol generated. He has vivid internal sensory information. Using SMECs, it looks like 3D image, very real seeming sound, sense, taste, place, time, I would say. Didn't ask about the content. I want him to be out of this state as quickly as possible. So really want to do this I'm talking about seconds. This is super fast. In those seconds, he's activating his sympathetic system. He folds, curls, tightens his body, moves behind his centre, and he says he feels sick and he's worrying. Worrying is the word that he uses to describe his emotions. I don't ask him his perceptions. I want to move off. I can see enough in that flash using QOCTU. I can observe how that one question activated that state so quickly. So move on very quickly to QC. Again, asked in a very neutral way, as neutral as possible. What might be happening at home when you're not there? And what I think was really interesting about this is it looked like it activated neural network B, the same one as the school, yeah? So what's that about? So that's where your calibration comes in and your tracking comes in. So you're thinking they look the same. So response B, again very similar to the other one. Vivid internal sensory information using SMEC seems, like large, real seeming images with noise and in relation to some sort of time and place is involved. Again, because we want to be very quick, we don't ask what the content is. There's not any need to ask for the content. After some havening, you probably offer the content anyway, or do a drawing of it or whatever. So not in this uncomfortable state, there's no need to ask. So again, sympathetic system folds, but this time he feels a bit sick and he says he feels fearful. And that's not surprising because we just activated this neural network a few minutes ago. So again, quickly moving on. So basically what we've got here is that level of activation. So then his loving caregiver touches his arm and makes eye contact. Let's call that QD. So I made it a golden bubble because it was done with love. So it was a Q, wasn't a neutral Q, it was a loving Q. However, what was interesting is it activated that neural network B again. It certainly looked like that. So we can see that we had a response B again. Again, adrenaline and cortisol. So again, vivid internal sensory information. And this time he gives some content and he speaks to the caregiver and says, I worry about. And the caregiver understands the missing piece of text and they have a silent, non-verbal communication. And it's clear they both know, or they both think they know, that what this is about. So again, it goes non-verbal this time, and sympathetic system clearly. He makes strong physical contact, pressing his whole body. He seeks eye contact, but it's intermittent, like a quick eye contact and pull away, and he engages with the caregiver. And this time he says he feels anxious. So we've got an active amygdala here, and it seems to be the same kind of network. So when we observe and calibrate and track, we've got a match. We've got QD is activating neural network B, and that was the same as Q, B, and C. So we've got the start of an activation of the amygdala. So we start event havening here, and so the next stage is to move. So very quickly, we are looking at 30 seconds or something here, for these three. It's very quick. And then we're moving on to here. So the caregiver and the child use the havening process. So they're both actually doing havening because they're both upset in that last minute. So let's work through it. So we're on QD. Activations occurred and the connections established. And the loving caregiver offers to give some havening touch and begins to do this. Event havening is used and the caregiver uses working memory displacement and the havener's prompting if needed as they go through the process steps. So it starts to change almost straight away. So we're going to call it neural network E because deep attention occurs very quickly and the AMPA receptors are being reabsorbed into the neuron, and you can see the changes, in a period of minutes coming over both of them actually. So as they start to feel safe, we use fun working memory displacement. So we know what's like, don't we? We know, like, imagine like a pink ice cream with, like tigers in it or something like that. So we do lots of kind of impossible future things. So we're using ideas about the future. We're using ideas that involve movement and counting, or things that we've worked out that he likes already. So we know that these things will generate doze, and he'll feel safe and, curious and confident. So it's working very quickly. You can see the shift to the parasympathetic system. He's smiling, he's softening, he's cuddling, he's giggling, he's loving. And then when we move out of doing displacements, so we do 5 minutes of displacements, and then we relax a bit and do a bit of palm havening, and just using QOCTU, just watching, so observing and calibrating and tracking, you can see the relief on both of their faces, and then they're both surprised, and they're able to kind of compare notes. You can see them, it's non-verbal, but they're comparing notes. Then they both are calmer. I think for the child, secret worries have been shared, and I think for the caregiver, there's a new insight that it wasn't about school, it was about worries about what was happening at home when he was in school. And this just seems to be very common. There's all sorts of things that can go on that they can worry about when they're not, when they're having to go to school. So when we were confident that he could express his changes, the caregiver, who had done the event havening sequence as well, by doing it by through touch with the palms and everything, and doing the displacement, reports feeling much better, and the child is enormously pleased, just hugely pleased. So that in itself, getting both havening, is part of that change, isn't it? So you're observing all of that, and then you really got to test your work. So what we're doing here is we've got these 3 cues, and a nod from me. The loving caregiver touches his arm and makes eye contact. This time it fires neural network F. Calmness, yeah? Bit of pleasure too. Then quite quickly, me saying, when you think about going to school, and there's a slow smile, and then what might be happening at home when you're not there? And again, you can see him thinking, checking his thoughts, checking his responses. There's a lot to observe, there's a lot to calibrate, there's a lot to track, and it's fast. So you want to be like using your QOCTU there, just like taking all that in. So yep. So what do you see? Sort of thoughts are kind of surprised, then curious, then calm, and then optimism. You can see that optimism and kind of hope coming through. Parasympathetic system clearly describes his body having a warm feeling, and feeling kind of inside himself. And this is a sort of generic case. So the other thing they say is feeling like that their feet are on the ground, or that they feel in the middle of themselves. Various different ways of describing it, but this one, so a warm feeling is a common one. And then this optimism. And then after a while we see these perceptions coming through, and the new perceptions are very different from the outset of the session. Now the child is saying, you can see they feel understood, they feel heard, they felt safe enough, they've shared, so they're not holding a secret anymore. All is well, and we see that optimistic frame. So there's an asterisk there. So there was some coaching done with caregivers, and exploring what these issues at home were and resolving them. and aiming to have more dose, more dopamine, more oxytocin, more serotonin, more endorphin at home, and ensuring a sense of safety so that he can go to school and enjoy it. So then the action taken by him was to go to school and enjoy it, and the action taken at home by caregivers was to make the environment safer. So just really interesting that the Emily here was, and this is common, the Emily's actually at home, and the desire to be at home is a need to be there. So it's about the meaning of what might be lost, and it's about being trapped at school and not being able to maybe protect people or pets or their belongings at home, and they want to be at home to protect, to keep things safe. So I've come across it a lot, so I thought I'd do a wee video of it. And nice to see you. So of course you can find more from me at Psychosensory Academy or Brain Art and Brain Sculpture.